Ladies and gentlemen, a very special guest this morning, Dr. Paul LaViolette, Ph.D., author, multidisciplinary researcher on all of the topics we discuss on the channel, including, but not limited to, mass extinctions, galactic superwave, and solar outbursts. And we're going to be having quite a lively discussion with Dr. Paul LaViolette. I apologize, Paul. If you don't know about Paul, we're going to leave you links to all his books here on Amazon: Antigravity Propulsion, Genesis of the Cosmos. The most recent book that I've got that I'm reading currently, Earth Under Fire, which is fascinating, and Decoding the Message of Pulsars, and many other. Paul is the founder, I believe, and the president of the Starburst Foundation, which we'll leave you links to this website. But his most recent works are over at etheric.com, which is the Sphinx Stargate, where you can find his recent blogs. Paul, it's a pleasure to have you on the show. Thank you for taking time. How the heck are you?
Okay, glad to be here, David.
Now, you've been working on these topics for decades, and your background is in physics and systems. Can you describe to the folks listening how you got involved in cosmology, basically? Because what your work is doing is similar to our work and many others. We're trying to inform the public that cosmology is dead. And anyone can figure that out by just reading the headlines every day. It says, scientists are baffled, and everything is explained away as black holes. So the whole universe is millions of black holes, and we can see them all, because I didn't think we could see a black hole, and everyone's baffled. So and it's mind-blowing as a scientist on my end, as a geologist. It's very easy to see that the theory they're using is 100% incorrect, and it needs to be rewritten.
Yes. Well, I got into cosmology from my physics theory I was developing called Subquantum Kinetics. And that emerged out of more of a systems approach, taking a systems approach. This was back in the 70s, and there was new things coming out in the field of reaction diffusion systems, creating patterns in chemistry. And I was thinking, couldn't you do the same thing in physics at the subquantum level as a way of generating field structures like particles? And Prigogine was working in the chemical field at that time with these ideas. So I took a model they were working on, the brucillator, I modified it, and we call it Model G. And we've done simulations, and it really produces very realistic versions of subatomic particles. They accelerate, they bond with each other. We're now working on trying to develop spin of the particle. We have a group meets every Sunday that's working on simulating Model G. Well, from subquantum kinetics, one of the predictions was that light should lose energy in intergalactic space. In other words, that photons should redshift. So that made me think back then in late 70s, could this be a cause of the redshift? And that's when I started getting into cosmology. And sure enough, this energy loss model that subquantum kinetics was predicting fit the data better than the Big Bang theory. And I tried it on various tests, a total of 4 different cosmology tests, and it was consistently coming closer to the data. Eventually got that published. And now I've published an update on that paper just last month with 8 tests now showing that it fits better. Also, I was getting into all aspects of astronomy to check out the predictions that subquantum kinetics was making. It predicts like a continuous creation of matter. You don't need a Big Bang. So one thing led to another. I also was getting involved in ancient mythology. I found that ancient creation myths were encoding the basic principles that describe this physics I had discovered. And that led into the tarot and astrology, the zodiac, which is really constellations in the sky. And they were also encoding this physics. And it was there that I discovered a message in the zodiac, sort of like a time capsule message that, like as if people from the past were trying to warn us about the galactic center, that it can erupt from time to time and affect the Earth. And this was totally unknown to astronomy. Nobody expected that the galactic center would affect the Earth. When I discovered that, I was a PhD in the system science program. And I immediately switched my topic, which my PhD was going to be on the physics theory I was developing. But then I saw this was more important because it's life-threatening.
Fascinating.
Absolutely no one knew anything about this. So I worked for 4 years on my dissertation. Ended up being 763 pages, quite a thick volume. And to this day, they still pull it out to threaten PhD candidates that they might have to produce something that thick for a dissertation. Most of them are very thin, actually.
Yeah, I can attest to that.
But I was researching all aspects.
Now, Paul, we share on our podcast a very similar idea, and it has to do with the Yuga cycles, which is simply the astrological wheel. And you know of the ages, like the age of Leo and currently in the age of Aquarius, etc. We believe also that ancient cultures using petroglyphs were showing us plasma discharge features in the night sky, which were warning. They were showing us the effects they were seeing in the sky, and these were petroglyphs worldwide. In fact, 30% of all the petroglyphs about 15 years ago were unexplained until the Electric Universe group called the Thunderbolts got together with Anthony Peratt. He's a plasma physicist down at Los Alamos. And he said, I make these plasma discharge features in the lab that are unexplained petroglyphs. And they poo-pooed him for a while.
I'm aware of Peratt's work.
Okay, what do you think of the work of Peratt, and how does it tie in?
It's very possible, what he's saying, that you could see these effects. But that's not my field. He's more of a specialist on that sort of thing.
Okay, so what is your specialty, and what can you bring to the table with the effects of the galactic superwave on our planet? What do you think the effects are? We were just discussing the Ice Age dusts.
Well, it's sort of like private eye work. You're at a scene of a crime looking for different evidence left because something happened in the past. And so if you specialize in one field, you're going to miss all the other stuff. So this was okay in my program, which was interdisciplinary program. So I could go into all sorts of fields. Went into paleontology, geology, astronomy, all sorts of different areas to assemble the evidence. And even ancient mythology, I was studying, like, for example, from North America, Indian myths from all over the world, relating to the burning of the earth, the Great Flood, cosmic dust coming into blacking out the stars, all of this stuff. So, we've sort of dismissed these myths as just being fantasy because we didn't have the understanding of this phenomenon to put it in a framework. And once you understand about the superwave and what it does, all this stuff starts to make sense.
Yeah.
So that's why my dissertation took 4 years to bring it all together. I did some testing of ice core samples because I theorized that if this did happen, if there was at the end of the ice age, because the zodiac was indicating a date 15,900 years ago that something happened. So I checked the ice for evidence that maybe cosmic dust would have gone up coming onto the Earth, that it was a greater influx. And at that time, everyone thought it was a crazy idea. They were assuming that cosmic dust has never changed on the surface of the Earth. It comes at a constant rate. So when I found that indeed there were 100 times, or in some case 1,000 times greater influx of cosmic dust during the Ice Age, it was a completely new thing. And not everyone in the cosmic dust field, accepted it. So that's probably why you haven't heard about it on major media networks. I mean, because the discovery was big enough, it should have been in all the newspapers and all the major news networks. But yeah. It goes against the standard model. And some of the results, it took me 30 years to publish, because one of the samples that had the highest amount of iridium is a cosmic dust indicator. It also had gold, and but most of it was tin and lead, like 90%. And when I would try to publish it, the referees would always say, "Oh, your sample got contaminated. That must be solder that got into your sample." And yet it wasn't my sample. I didn't filter it. I took it from Lonnie Thompson, who's been given the Presidential Award for glaciologists. He had a clean room that had a double door airlock, and he used triple distilled water. So if anything was going to be pristine, it was coming from his laboratory. And he also found the tin. That's why I selected that sample. I wanted to find out what it was. And it took me a long time to finally research all aspects of that. I found that the tin had an isotopic anomaly, which means the isotopes, because tin has 10 isotopes, that they're not like what you find on Earth. They're not the ratios you find on Earth. So that indicates that it's of cosmic origin. And then I found that it also had lead, and that the tin and lead were in the ratio, not like you see in the solar system, but like you see in interstellar space. And then I did some electron microscope work at RPI with some people there, and found that the particles were like conglomerates of nanoparticles, what we call porous aggregates, which is what you find for cosmic dust.
Yeah.
And all this together finally clicked, and I realized, well, tin and lead are among the only elements that are superconducting when you get close to 3 degrees, like out in interstellar space. So if you have superconducting dust and you get a magnetic field coming through, it's going to sweep up and collect that. It's what's called the Meissner effect. It pushes superconducting particles if there's a magnetic field. And that could have concentrated it. And finally, with that mechanism, the referees accepted the paper. And it would the significance is that sample is the first time we've discovered interstellar dust on the Earth's surface in large amounts like that.
What's the time frame of that sample? Is that 15,006?
Around 49,000 years ago.
Okay, 49. Okay, so that is just prior to...
49,000. And then there was...
that's prior to the extinction of Neanderthal.
It was a big extinction event.
Yes, then the extinction event happened, it's argued, between 45 and 42,000 years ago. And it also corresponds to a reduction.
Closer to 42 to 40 to 42,000, but it started around 45,000.
Yeah.
You got radiocarbon activity picking up.
We have a huge field reduction
and you had
in the magnetic
of the
field.
Neanderthals.
The field reduction in the magnetic field is what I want to get to, because
you had a field reversal.
Yeah,
Did you read that part of my talk? Yeah, you had a field reversal. It's called the Lechamp reversal.
Yes,
which occurred right at the peak, and you see the beryllium-10 spike is from the Vostok ice core in Antarctica. It's the biggest spike that we've had in the last 60,000 years. It occurred 41,000 years at peak. And at that time, the Earth's magnetic field reversed, and it was also at the time that the radiocarbon excess was at a peak, meaning the sun was extremely active and was putting out solar cosmic rays that were creating this elevated radiocarbon on the Earth. And I had proposed a mechanism in my dissertation back in 83, that if you get a lot of cosmic rays coming from the sun, they get caught in the Earth's radiation belts, and they produce what's called a ring current, which creates a magnetic field opposed to the Earth's field. So the cosmic rays that are trapped by the Earth's magnetic field end up creating a magnetic field opposed to that field. And if you get enough cosmic rays trapped, can actually cancel out the field entirely. And I believe that's what causes a reversal. Now, I had proposed that years before they found that reversals actually can occur quite rapidly. Yep. Like the Steens Mountain reversal, it took 8 days. Before that, they thought that reversals take thousands of years. So with my mechanism, I was suggesting, no, it's due to the sun. It can be very rapid. So that was a confirmation of what I was saying. And you see that now with the 41,000 year reversal of Lechamp. It occurred quite quickly. And there was a period of about 800 years that the Earth's field was at 5% normal. So that means that not only you were getting a lot of cosmic rays from the sun, but they were contacting the Earth's surface. In other words, we were no longer protected by the Earth's field. They would have been striking the atmosphere. They would have eliminated the ozone layer. They would completely destroy the ozone layer. So UV would have also come through. So it was very hazardous. And in fact, I had proposed this back in '89, that very likely Neanderthal man became extinct at this time. But at that time, there was not enough data to prove that. Because at that time, they thought Neanderthal man sort of disappeared over a 15,000 year period. And it was only about 4 or 5 years ago that some researchers found that the dates were wrong, that the Neanderthal all died out at the same time. And it happened to be right at the peak of that event during that reversal. So there you have it. This was one of the major superwaves, and that shows the superwave can extinct a whole species of mankind.
It may.
What was the difference between
It may have the possibility. It may have the possibility, but in my opinion, based on the evidence, the reduction in the biome is never more than 60. 80% back into Paleozoic, but I believe those dates, like the Permian extinction, are way too old for us to actually have a grip on the paleontology of that period. But in the more recent time, I can really come to terms with the 42,000-year-old extinction event, maybe eliminating half of the biome on the surface. And then we come to the Younger Dryas event, where we now have some really good papers that are showing 60 to 65% of megafauna going extinct in North America during that 12,900 year event. Mm-hmm. Does your galactic wave have a periodicity? Do you have a set number of when it affects us? Is there a time frame?
Yeah, there was one researcher did a Fourier analysis of the cosmic ray peaks in the Vostok ice core. And using his data, it shows that there's about one periodicity is around 25,000 years, close to the precessional cycle. Another is at half a precessional cycle, around 12,500 years. There's also one at 40,000, which is also connected. There, we have the nodding cycle where the Earth's axis nods up and down on a 40,000 year cycle.
The obliquity.
So that originated from that major event.
That would be the Milankovitch.
There's also one around 5,300, 5,600 years, which is close to the Mayan cycle.
Yeah, so you have...
And we do see a peak at 5,300 years ago. There was a small peak of cosmic rays.
Yeah, well...
And I just learned that right after that, the whole Ross sheet ice shelf disappeared. Within a few hundred years after that small superwave event, the Ross sheet ice shelf melted. And it took several thousand years for it to gradually come back to what we see today.
And in mythology, that time frame, 5,800, corresponds to the flood of Noah.
Well, I think that the Noah flood date is off. The flooding, all the flooding evidence you see occurred during the Ice Age. And it was because the Earth was covered with ice sheets. And when you got these warmings of the sun, where the sun warmed the Earth and actually, some cases, burned the surface of the Earth. I mean, you see deposits of burnt wood. I mean, it's black. It's what we call lignite. And you would have gotten torrential avalanches of water coming down from the ice sheet, starting at maybe 2.5 kilometers height. And as it came down, it would discharge all these lakes of meltwater on the surface of the ice sheet and end up producing a wave, maybe 500 feet high and going several hundred miles an hour and might be 1,000 kilometers wide, just sweeping down. I believe all the canyon features in North America were produced that way in the West. The Grand Canyon, all the canyons further north. I went out to see that area, sort of a combination vacation and geology field trip. And my feeling is these glacier waves came down and they created a huge lake in that area. It was like a glacier lake of water. And eventually it found a way to discharge through some crevasses and ended up over the years carving out the canyon. This didn't happen with one event. It was just over and over these glacier waves were coming down. And today you can see the results. The Grand Canyon is the biggest example.
Well, are you familiar with the works of Randall Carlson and his work on the mega floods?
Carlson, no. What does he say?
Well, he has excellent geologic proof of mega flooding events in the Northwest, and this was due to huge failures of a glacial lake system up in Canada, where the features are massive. They're ripple features in Washington and Oregon that are a quarter-mile wide, and these are in large flat valleys where these outwashes occurred. There's also waterfall structures.
Yeah, I discussed that in my book.
Yeah, there's waterfall
there's
features.
The Spokane flood.
Yep, yeah, that's exactly.
Dremlin.
Now, it's our supposition, Paul.
People before him.
It's our supposition.
Pioneered that work.
Yeah, it's our supposition, Paul, now at the Oppenheimer Ranch Project, that because of our extensive work on the Younger Dryas event, and you were just referring back to the black mats, the entire burning of the Northern Hemisphere, In the last 10 years, that evidence has become so overwhelming. Recent research has been shared with some Russian scientists, and these black mats wrap all the way around through Asia, all through Siberia, and all through North America. So what we have to have is the entire burning of boreal forests almost instantaneously on the whole Earth, followed by this huge glacial outwash or outburst of all the melting, and then all the catastrophic carnage, the mass extinction of the megafauna. They all get buried on that black mat layer. And then scientists like you and I have to suffer through headlines where they're blaming Clovis people for overhunting mammoths and burning the forests.
Right.
I mean, the state of science has become almost an idiocracy. What are your thoughts?
Exactly. I agree entirely with you. In fact, Admiral Forrestal, I think it was his name, back in 1942 or so, he was a Navy admiral, was saying that most of the information written in books and taught in the universities is complete horseshit.
Yeah.
And the people, the PhDs are learning baloney. That's why the military doesn't take people out of the university for their black projects. They want people out of high school who haven't been contaminated by all this baloney.
Yep. And what is the purpose of this misinformation? Have you ever delved into that aspect?
Well, that gets into ETs. That's a little far out. I don't know if you want to get into that.
Well, I knew that we were going to, I wanted to end up there, so we might as well jump off the cliff.
This is not anything to do with my theory. This comes from just trying to get informed on what the heck is going on our planet. And William Tompkins has written a very good book. The name slips me, but in his interviews, you learn about the existence of aliens, species, and in other interviews, the internet is full of testimonials that we're sort of under the thumb of a reptilian type of species, that we are one of many planets that they are in charge of, sort of dominating. And our destiny is not in our own hands at this point, and that's why we have a space force now. We're creating a resistance to all this. We're sort of standing up now. So they've been this race, this ET race, according to Tompkins. And Tompkins is very good, I should say, very good authority. I mean, he was working for Douglas Aircraft during the 50s and 60s. It was designing spacecraft back then, part of black projects, highly classified. But he says that our theories are purposely kept to be baloney so that we don't progress. Our physics only accepts, is based on the idea of energy conservation. That's a main key in it. And that's why they don't accept things like free energy machines. They keep our physics with general relativity, which makes it very difficult for people to believe in anti-gravity. When you get out of those concepts, everything opens up. You realize our whole galaxy we are in the over-unity area of the cosmos. Wherever you have, I've shown this in my latest paper that I published in the Journal of Astronomy and Astrophysics. that you actually get blue shifting of photons going through the Virgo cluster and coming into our own galaxy cluster. And so in our area, energy creates more energy. So this is all predictions that come out of subquantum kinetics. It's very, it basically shifts all of your categories. And I know it's probably difficult for people to accept it just hearing a few words. You have to really get into what I've written to see what a big paradigm shift it is. You find that whole stars like red dwarfs are not run by fusion or by heat that they got from when they collapsed. They're powered by what I call genic energy, which is this photon blue shifting effect. It's like you put money in the bank and it generates interest. That interest is this genic energy. And I've made predictions with that. I said if that's true, then you might see that the planets also that they should be producing energy in their interiors. This was before they really were finding this out, and I started checking. They were just sending out the probes to Jupiter and Saturn, and then they found indeed they were producing energy in their interiors. And so I ended up plotting the planets on the same graph with the red dwarf stars. This is what's called a mass luminosity plot, where you plot the mass against the luminosity of the star. And I put the planets, mass versus luminosity of the planets. And they fell on the same line. And you can't explain that with normal physics. Why would whatever's happening in the planets be the same that's happening in the red dwarf stars? And subquantum kinetics says that it's genic energy, and it fit the prediction perfectly.
Fascinating, Paul.
So this gets into other areas. We're out of the geology area here, but it also touches on what causes these core explosions. So the core of the galaxy is, in this physics, is not a black hole, because black holes cannot exist in this physics because you're producing so much energy spontaneously, that spontaneously generated energy in the interior of the star, whatever. I call it a mother star. It's a supermassive star. It's, in our case,
Sagittarius.
The core of the galaxy, it's 4 million times the mass of the sun.
Sagittarius would be what we're talking about, Sag B.
Sagittarius A star, they call it, right? And so it's not able to collapse. And it's also producing matter. It's generating matter. And the explosions that come from the core play an important role, because 95% of the matter that is in the galaxy originated from the core. So that stuff is exploded outward, and it ends up forming the spiral arms. Our galaxy, if you go back in history, used to be a dwarf galaxy with just like a little oval. And over time, as the core mother star grew and grew and started exploding, blowing more stuff out, eventually formed spiral arms. And this was Shapley's, was it Shapley, Hubble and Shapley? They Hubble had a galaxy evolution diagram. He called it the tuning fork diagram. And it was exactly that way that galaxies evolved from small to large. And now the studies show that's exactly what happens. The galaxies were smaller in the past, billions of years ago. And subquantum kinetics says that's because they're growing. Astronomers they don't have that option, so they say, well, galaxies must have been colliding and accumulating to make bigger galaxies. And that has been disproven, that there's no way that could have happened.
No.
So it's one of the mysteries for them. Why are the galaxies today larger than they used to be?
Well, if you work in a fantasy paradigm where everything is dark energy, dark matter, then facts don't matter. And they work in these fantasy, science fiction, fairy tales and everything's explained away as a black hole. In our paradigm, we like to use actual science where you have observation, you have theory proposals, and then you work forward using visible cues and not made up stuff. And almost everything that we're physically observing, now that we have multiple wavelengths we can see in our universe, none of it lines up with the classic model. It needs to be rewritten. Black holes need to go. And I'm with you, Paul, but in our interpretation, I don't know if you'll agree or disagree, we believe the universe to be infinite. In which case you can have your kinetic theory working, because in an infinite space you can produce infinite amount of matter. And I
agree.
Yeah, and I don't know.
Infinite in space, and
go ahead.
Trillions of years at least.
And growing as we speak. Now
you're not restricted like you are with the Big Bang Theory.
Right, exactly. And a lot of mathematicians agree with us. Top mathematicians around the world. I've been to many conferences where they disprove Big Bang Theory, because in a Big Bang model, you can't even, in their models, they can't even have the things they want. And it's very bizarre how cosmology is working with this hashed up model. And they just throw in cosmological constants because none of their theories are correct. And they just make up some constant that makes it work. And the fact that black holes are now being observed everywhere just blows my mind. And it's a sad day for cosmology, in my opinion. We've only touched...
Well, an easy way to disprove black holes.
Go ahead.
You can disprove black holes easily. Soren Kosofret is an astronomer, physicist. And he's very a critic of modern ideas in physics and astronomy. And he said that if there were black holes, because they say there's many more black holes than we actually see, they're just small black holes floating around in space. They haven't grown big enough yet. Well, he said if there were black holes floating around in space, we would see gravitational lensing of stars all the time. We would see stars moving around, and we don't see that. So that proves it. And if you look at some of the black holes that they do see, they're not gravitationally lensing stars. Even pulsars, they talk about them being neutron stars that are so compact that they should gravitationally lens starlight. And that's not the case.
No.
So it shows you a lot of the ideas are total baloney. And they're kind of scared in their boots to change their ideas because they don't have a theory to go to.
Yeah.
Subquantum Kinetics is trying to create that framework. And we have thousands of people have read the book, Subquantum Kinetics, and there's a big following. But it hasn't gotten to the point of being mainstream yet.
Yeah, well,
but it could. I see that ultimately it will replace physics in the future.
We are in a tidal shift in critical thinking and scientific inquiry. It's just that those that are involved in it are being crushed by those that are in power. The mainstream doesn't want to hear alternative ideas. Censorship is at an all-time high. And many people that talk about the very things that you've written about over the decades are being censored, pushed off of platforms like YouTube and Facebook simply because of their ideas. Do you have any thoughts as we close up here on our first discussion ever, which has been a pleasure, Paul, and we've just touched the surface on so many topics. What are your thoughts on the nature of the censorship happening currently in our world?
You mean on Facebook and YouTube and so on?
Exactly.
Yeah, I think Trump did the right thing to sue their pants off. I hope they win that case.
Amen to you. And guys, if you don't know about Dr. Paul LaViolette, please come over and subscribe to his Facebook channel. Grab a few of his books here on Amazon: Antigravity Propulsion, Genesis of the Cosmos, Earth Under Fire, Humanity's Survival of the Ice Age, and Decoding Pulsars. We're also going to leave you links to his most recent lecture here on June 11th a Zoom lecture given at HGS Astronomical Society of London, which is an overview of the galactic superwave theory from Paul. And Paul, I would hope that you would allow us to have another discussion in the future. I'm particularly interested in talking to you about your idea of the generation of the mega glacial meltwater floods versus our idea, and that we can have an academic discussion without arguing over our ideas. Does that sound like something you could do in the future?
Yeah, well, maybe we do that. Yeah. I just wanted to mention that I sell all my books and videos on the etheric.com site. If you just go to the bookstore. And so it's all grouped together. There's
can we get
ebooks and stuff.
So we're here at etheric.com. We're looking at it. Can we get signed copies of your books? Because I'd be interested in that.
Yeah, if you order like the paperbacks, not the ebooks, I do sell like Secrets of Antigravity Propulsion, Earth Under Fire, Genesis of the Cosmos. So if you specify you want a signed copy, you can do that.
Wow. We just opened up the Stargate.
But there's a lot of free stuff too. There's a lot of free downloads, papers, if you check the archive.
Well, Dr. Paul, it's a pleasure. Thank you for coming on the show. Thousands of people are going to watch this podcast, and many of them are going to buy your books. And we hope in the future we can have you back on for a lively discussion about things that aren't discussed often enough.
Okay. Well, thank you for having me, David.
Be safe. We love you, Paul.